Okay.
hide it there.
Okay.
All right, so go ahead and tell me what are some of the most instrumental cases you to our community that you tried.
Well, in congressional redistricting litigation, we were the lead party that led to or provided for the creation of Congressional District 9 in its current form, represented by Congressman Al Green. And so that was important to get another African American opportunity district in Texas. I think that was also involved in Galveston County. The litigation led to JP and Constable districts there. I was involved in litigation this time that prevented the H283 or C185, two discriminatory maps, from ever going into effect in Texas. And we were able to change some of the extreme gerrymandering that took place in reference to a Congressional District 30 where anyone African American Latino was all dumped into Congressman Johnson's district, and we were also able to help restore the 9th and the 18th, represented by Congressman Green, Congressman Jackson Lee, in terms of having their original integrity and not creating any rift between the African American and Latino community. So those things were extremely important. I would also say the recent litigation, I was one of the lawyers involved in the voter ID litigation, and that litigation prevented discriminatory voter ID law from going into effect. It went into effect briefly, but a federal court ordered some changes to that. The legislature made some similar changes later on. We weren't totally pleased with the changes, but it was a much better law, and that's what's in effect now. So based on our action, along with other allies, we were able to succeed in that regard. Here in Austin, filed litigation that led to the city of Austin treating more seriously the promotional aspects of the lives of police officers, where they had tests that were not properly constructed, put together by individuals that did not have the requisite expertise that determined the lives of police officers. So I represented a number of police officers. We sued the city, and the city changed that policy. I represented a number of young African American children, 13 and 14 years of age, who were abused by police in what was called the Cedar Avenue incident. Ultimately, after a retrial was ordered in the case, and the jury had been out for 3 days, it turns out the bailiff had gone to the jury and used some racial invective and said they should decide against me and my clients. And the judge called the jury back in, and they said, yeah, and he said a lot, and he and others said a lot more than that. So we were able to get a new trial. Senator Orris West got him to come in. We were able to get the city to mediation. It created a fund of about $1.2 million that helped educate young people who were involved in that case. And many of them went to college. Many of them got trade educations or what have you, or treatment for issues that they might have been having. So that was somewhat historical in terms of how that happened. It led to the creation of the Police Monitor's Office. It led to the requirement that the police officers in Austin wear the body cams. So we were one of the first, but it all stems back to the litigation. I was also very pleased to have represented Chief Mike McDonald when he was wrongfully being harassed by officers in the Austin Police Department who did not like him because of the color of his skin. And they did many things to him and trumped up things that were untrue we were able to show. But I think that, thank goodness that Chief McDonald, who's as honest as the day is long, had somebody looking out for him, because I remember once they even tried to plant crack cocaine in his car, but God told him to look in his back seat. And he called me, and so we had DPS and all those go out. So fingerprints weren't on the bag, but some of his colleagues had popped his car, no doubt, and put the crack cocaine in the back. So you find those kinds of things. I was also a lawyer for Riverside General Hospital, a historically black hospital for many years. It was one of the last in the country. I think they're going to bring it back. It was shut down after some nefarious circumstances in my mind recently, but I can remember litigating against the state of Texas and prevailing in an opportunity in an effort to shut them down. And the judge wrote a 350-page opinion where he said this is the most obvious example of racism he'd ever seen. An older white male judge that wrote the opinion, and we ultimately sued one of the big accounting firms and the state over the mishandling and the intentional discrimination against them, and we were able to take that to a successful solution. So I'm real glad of that. I've had some real good jury verdicts working with my good friend Robert Knudsen, where we even won 2 major jury verdicts against the entity that is responsible for enforcing the discrimination laws in Texas. So those were some of the things that I think that might have been significant that I've handled. There are a number of others relating to charter schools and some of the requirements, but the sad thing is the courts have become less people conscious and they've become more result conscious and who's on what side, and so there are some issues like that. But I've always tried to think out of the box, and I've done things such as challenge the composition of grand juries and things like that, something that maybe lawyers did back in the 50s and 60s, but I've not done that much. But in several counties I've challenged the grand jury foreman representation status.
So it's safe to say when people see you coming, it's not a good thing.
Well, some say that's true, and sometimes it works, because there are some areas where I've been where the authorities will want to resolve issues instead of having us to come in. Because I know it's not a good thing when your whole system of selecting grand juries, for example, is actually challenged, where you can show systematically over time that African Americans are underrepresented as forepersons or just as members of the grand jury, and most folks don't do that now. And I can remember I challenged that in a neighboring county. It wasn't Travis County, but a county very close by, and the judge had the hearing on the motion the day before trial. We went until 3 or 4 in the morning. He denied my motion at 3 or 4 in the morning, but the DA was so concerned by what we found that instead of my client was looking at 99 to life as a minimum, we made an agreement for a 7-year deal. So, that's the kind of thing that those kind of things can help you do.
So why do you do what you do? Because it seems like it can be pretty dangerous for you because of who you're really fighting,
Oh, I've had death threats. I had one of my a dog of mine that I love dearly to be murdered. I've had a member of the Klan to be prosecuted for intending to murder me and 2 other people. And so, yeah, those kind of things do happen. But that's the way it is when you deal in those arenas, that you expect those things you expect there to be threats, and I know that there have been threats, there are threats, but I'm willing to deal with the threats and have them.
So why do you think that because that's big, people do it in the 50s and did it in the 50s and 60s, but modern day, how do you keep motivated to do what you do?
Well, I think because you have to. Everyone went to law school for a different reason, and I can say I've been bumped over the head a few times too, right? Because every time you go somewhere, you don't succeed in what you're trying to do, and especially a lot of times because sometimes judges have all the power, and that makes for a difficult circumstance when that's the case. So you really sometimes let Rod Seeger run it against the wind, but you still have to run if that's the only direction you can go. If the water or the ocean's trying to catch it in the other direction or something, then you need to run in the direction of, and so you do it because you have to do it. And the thing that I believe that I want young people to know, and this worked for a while, it's becoming increasingly difficult in the current climate, is that most people have goodwill inside them. They can be some of the most conservative people, but you need to understand where that good chord is. Now, there are some people out there that don't, but most people do. And so, with the change in times, I've tried to devise theories and strategies where if you had any common decency that you might decide in our favor, But I think it's so different now. I think there's a case now in court by a guy from Amarillo, a business person, where he's trying to show that in the Texas court system now, that when you have victories in those systems, that you're still likely to get overturned because of politics and circumstances without regard to the law. And he's brought in statistical analyses to actually to help make his argument. So he makes an argument where he shows in various circumstances what ought to happen and what's the likelihood of a change, and then he shows how changes take place, and so there's got to be something else afoot. It's kind of like when one of the challenges that I did to grand juries, my expert from the University of Houston said that when you're 2 standard deviations away, or I think in that case it was 3 standard deviations, that it was so irregular that you had to presume that something improper was afoot, and so it wasn't just a coincidence that you did not have African Americans on the jury. That it had to be something wrong that was amiss, not just coincidental.
Where were you born and raised?
I was born out in West Texas, out in Odessa, Midland. So I'm kind of a good old cowboy by trade or what have you. So I come from oil field country, worked in the oil fields and all that growing up. So integrated the bowling alleys and all that, and had some unique experiences when they finally desegregated and put the blacks and the browns together, but not the whites, and being involved in a number of games and activities where the opposing crowd is calling us the N-word or throwing rocks at our bus and things like that. It was a different world back in the early 70s, yeah.
Wow, so why did you decide to be a lawyer?
To change things, because I grew up watching Martin Luther King on television, right? I mean, you saw all the bad things that happened, and so I looked up to Martin Luther King and Thurgood Marshall, and I can't hold their cleats, but I wanted to do what I could to try to make things better, because you ran into things like that all the time. I got picked up when I was in the 6th grade for being suspected of stealing a car. I was 10 years old, right? And so, because I was a young 6th grader, and it is what it is, but you have things like that happen to you. My first day in Austin, I've been invited to a party went to University of Texas registration, and some black students were finding all the new black students. They gave me a thing for a party, and so my cousin and I, who was the first year along with me, we pulled into Dunkin' Donuts on Burnett Road to look at the map, because we didn't know exactly where we were. What happened? The police officer comes over, pulls us out. What y'all doing? We're looking at a map, sir. We've always encountered those things. I've had guns pulled on me by police officers even after I've been a prosecutor and things like that. So, you see things like that happen, and you want them to change, and it takes. And I'm hoping that the young people will be a lot more effective than me, and some of the mistakes and things I've made, that I can help teach them to where they can learn. Well, don't do it this way, do it the other way, that kind of thing. But the good thing is you've had a community that's with you. Like I never know how the great work that Pam Wade and and all those did, Roxanne Evans, etc., helping to turn people out for the Cedar Avenue trial. We needed to show people that it was a community trial. It wasn't about just those kids. It wasn't just about money. You know, in fact, when we settled the case, the police union despised me so much, they said that they would allow the city to settle with one stipulation, that I not get a dime. And so I didn't get a dime. It was $1.2 million got put into the fund, but I didn't get a dime. But that was important to do it for the community.
I mean, I've always heard your name, but I don't know anybody else in Texas that is as well known and does what you do. Why do you think you're so respected in what you do? So why do you think that you're that guy? You're that guy for Texas. Whenever something happens, people say your name.
Well, I guess I've been blessed and fortunate and lucky. I mean, I haven't become wealthy or anything like that, but I've had some really good success. And even when you don't have success, sometimes you're out there, you have a bit of a success because you're bringing clarity to an issue, right? You're one of the ones that folks know is willing to stand up. One of the best compliments ever paid to me was I was out in Jasper, and a guy says to me, you're one of the best things that ever happened to poor black people because you really care about them. Because, sometimes you have that disconnect in our community where you have those who look more favorable on those who have more means or what have you. And you never can tell because, I think that things happen to us whether we're well-to-do or not, that bad things happen to us. And I've had to go represent the little brothers for FBI agents and things when they got harassed by police officers and things. So, you never kind of get out of that whole realm. The case against the DPS was one of the battles we took on where we got the first black Texas Ranger and the first woman Texas Ranger. And, that was a really historic undertaking, but they had tails on me and trying to find dirt on me, and they told me that in the negotiation sessions. And the black troopers warned me that they had done that, and so, you have those kind of things. When you do things, you always have to make sure you stay on the straight and narrow. I can remember during that case, they brought Rolex watches and tried to sell me. They brought gorgeous women to offer themselves to me, and I said, well, I've never been a ladies' man. I said, look at it, So when one color didn't work, they'd send another one, right? So I said, Bledsoe, you're not that, right? And so, so sometimes you have to be guided by the right force, and thank God that I always was, because they got one of our branch presidents in the same time because he bought a hot typewriter. And you just can't do it, when you're under scrutiny. Like Muhammad Ali says, you never should have the illusion of inclusion. And because there's a different standard, you always need to make sure that you follow those rules.
That's amazing. And I think you did talk about the advice that you would give to young lawyers who would want to be you when they grow up.
Well, there's so many great young lawyers that I've, my 2 years as dean at Thurgood Marshall was great, and so many young people like B.J. Kemp I've become so close with, or some of the head of the Civil Rights Society, Shalisa Brunson, or Janori Wright, who's my legal assistant, or like I've got a student that I kind of have adopted as like a nephew over at UT Law School, Anthony Collier. I call him Mandela. And I think he is going to be someone that's going to go out and do the kind of work that I do. He's not really motivated by financial means. He's motivated by change, and he's done things like go do some of his master's work in Egypt and things like that. He's just at peace with who he is, and he really wants to make the world a better place, and so I'm so proud of him. So I know there are those people out there that want to do that, and so keep running into young people like that really makes a huge difference to me.
Who do you admire?
Well, I admire so many people. Obviously, Thurgood Marshall. When you read the stories about Thurgood Marshall, I've been teaching a course on Thurgood Marshall the last few years at Thurgood Marshall Law School, and Thurgood was almost lynched one time. People don't know the story, but an incredible situation where an African American had gotten out of the military. He looked very young. He was 23. He'd been the middleweight champion of the United States military. Well, his mom had an appliance that had been worked on or that needed to be worked on. She took it up to the store, and the guy was nasty and ugly to her. She said, well, give it back and I'll just go somewhere else. And they left. They were leaving, and the guy shouted something at the young man, said, oh, you don't like it, huh? You called him the N-word or what have you. And he continued to walk, so he threw radio or something and hit him, and he continued to walk. So finally, the white man behind the counter runs out and grabs him by the shoulder, and didn't realize he was grabbing the welterweight champion of the United States Navy, and so he ended up getting filleted. A number of other white citizens come by; they were filleted by this young man as well. So the young man and his mother were charged with assault, and so when the wealthy black person in the town, like black folks were always so closely together, went to bail them out, word got out they were going to bail them out, so he charged the young man and mom with attempted murder. And so this is 1946. So 1943, a black person acted like they had rights, and so the Klan had to go into the black community, kill a couple of folks and all that. And so they always did the same thing. They got a big mob and they marched into the black community. So this time you had this young man and a number of others who just gotten out of service in the United States military. They were trained with carbines and all that and still had some of them. So they waited for the Klan group to arrive into the black community. They ended up shooting him from the tops of buildings and making the Klan crowd to disperse. And so they charged 26 people with no one died with attempted murder or what have you, and so they made them try them separately. Thurgood Marshall put a team together. They went in, and none of them ever saw jail. 25 were completely acquitted. The very last one, they convicted him of a misdemeanor that didn't require him to go to jail because they were worried about a riot, and they were right about that. So what happened was the Klan stopped Thurgood after the trial and said, and everything was okay. He wasn't DWI. About 5 or 10 minutes later, he gets stopped again. But this time he'd moved. He wasn't driving anymore, but they swore that he was driving. So they made him get in the car, told the other lawyers, Alexander Luby and the others, to keep driving. And they said they would. And so the crowd took him, and then he turned off on a dirt road. But Luby and the other guys noticed where they were taking Thurgood Marshall. So they followed. They made a U-turn and surreptitiously followed the car, and they had the noose strung up, and the town was down there. They were ready for the festivity to hang this in lawyer, and Luby and crew drove in and wouldn't leave, and they took Thurgood to town, and the judge said they charged Thurgood with DWI, and the judge said, well, I agree, if you take my test, I'll let you go. If not, I'm going to put you in jail. Thurgood said, well, I'll take your test. What is it? He said, well, come up here and blow in my face. So Thurgood went up and blew in his face, and the judge said, oh, you hadn't been drinking anything. Because ironically, it turns out the judge had bought the last bit of moonshine available in the county. And so that was a story about what happened with Thurgood Marshall. And another story, the guy who replaced him, Jack Greenberg, when he was a young lawyer, they attempted to lynch him in Florida after they murdered my counterpart out there, Harry Woods and his wife, Harriet Woods, for trying to register black people to vote and all that. In Florida, they attempted to lynch Jack Greenberg. Devil in the Grove is a book that details that. So those kind of you do have those issues that come up when you are when you're a civil rights lawyer.
Wow, that's amazing. So, what do you feel is your place or your purpose in life?
Well, our purpose in life, hopefully, is to make the world a better place before I'm gone. And I'm so proud that I'm working on these initiatives. That somehow, out of the clear blue, in 2017, I get an email. I just become acting dean, and this group is looking to improve relations with HBCUs in Africa. And through a quirk of circumstances, I've been working with a number of folks on that, and we had such a great conference. I think that there's so much economic opportunity that's available in Africa today. Africa is the richest continent in the world, and I think kind of a homecoming the way that others. This all came to fruition for me when up in Dallas a few years back, a black man had been murdered by an individual who worked at the store owned by a Korean American, and there were a lot of protests and all that, and they had the National Korean Business Persons Association meeting in Dallas. They invited me to come up because of all the unrest. So I went up for it and invited me to the meeting. I was shocked. There were 1,100 Korean business people from around the country. I said, this is a big time meeting. And they had me up at table 1. They didn't have a head table. They had me at table 1. And I sat at the table, and there were 2 members of the South Korean cabinet, 2 bankers from South Korea, and the officers from the organization. And I realized at that time, that's power. That's power, because see, you allow money from the country that you hail from, your ancestors, to come here and allow you to get involved in the greatest capitalist nation in the world, to make money and all that, and opportunity. And obviously that money ends up helping people in South Korea. And everyone can do it. If you're from Ireland, you can do that, right? If you're from Switzerland, you can do that. If you're from Sweden, you can do that. But we can't do it because we don't know where we're from. And recently, and so that event with the UNDP and also efforts in reference to others that have done that, the ambassador for the African Union, she has got this initiative she's undertaken, and so I was contacted as part of that. She had her inaugural activity at Texas Southern, and so what she's trying to do is to bring the African diaspora together. And so her idea that she's really pushing for is to provide for an opportunity for citizenship in one country for any person who was not born in Africa, who is a member of the African diaspora. So I've been working very hard with that group and to provide many opportunities because she's got a great vision. And so I think she will be bringing great things. And so Arinkawa? I can, yeah. I'll give you all of her info. I'm trying to pronounce the name correctly. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, which you should look her. I can send you a video on her.
Please.
And she's a tremendous lady.
I've been trying to find a way because, that's one of the things that I feel like, there's so many African American businesses, but it's like you said, they don't know where they came from. So it's all a hustle. And it's like, we've got to get out of the hustle mentality and work our business. And to me, a lot of times, I think if we can, when we go to other countries, to me, that's when you really understand the power that America has.
Yeah.
When you've never left the U.S., this is all you know. When you go there and you see where you came from, then this is what I need to do.
Well, and this week I got invited. I just got an invite this week. Andrew Young, who has seen the power of corporations and understand that politics get you so far, but corporations get you further. I don't know exactly how, but he's been brought into this initiative. And so Andrew Young is having having a news conference where he's addressing this issue in Atlanta on March 6th. Is that Friday or Saturday of this week? And I got invited to the news conference, so I don't think I'll be able to make it, but if I can, I will. But I think that's really significant.
Yeah, because I don't think we can do it without help, without the sisterhood of the continent, because we're trying to do it.
And you should look at what Morgan State is doing, and my friend Dr. Raymond Terry, and what they're doing, and the partnership that they've created with Africa. I think it's really beautiful. And in the group, we've divided up. We're looking at 5 issues, and I'm the national chair of the issue on creating a fair jurisprudence and bringing about gender equity and more equality in Africa, and recommending things there. So there are 5 co-chairs with our chair. Fareed Muhammad is our chair. He's been a great leader for us, and Fareed is a great guy. But I'm the co-chair of that legal part there. And so we're working to bring some issues there, but I think we have an economic development part that is, I think there is a conference by that subcommittee or a meeting coming up in New York on the 16th of March.
I don't know if you told me. Who do you admire?
Who would I admire? Obviously, I was talking about Thurgood Marshall because of his courage, and Martin Luther King because of his courage. I'm one of those who firmly believe that Martin Luther King was anointed by God. There's so many things. If you read A Knock at Midnight, listen to that, and listen to one of the sermons. He's 26. There's no way he could have known those things, the 26-year-old person. So I'm totally convinced of that. Nelson Mandela, who what he did, I was able to tell, my son knows him, and when we had my birthday party for my wife in New York a couple of weeks ago, I got to meet him, and I was able to tell him that the thing about his grandfather that stood out so much to me was his grandfather reached a point to where the material or human things didn't make a difference. He was in a realm where he was trying to make things right. And so he knew the thing about even how to turn the other cheek, See, one of the things that I use now, like speeches that I'm giving, and I'm giving like in the Black History Month speeches on voting rights, is there's such fear about blacks and Latinos taking over that people think that we will be hostile towards them the way that whites were hostile towards us. And that's not true. So what do? I cite the Mandela example, because Mandela was able to do things where whites have been very comfortable in South Africa because he understood they needed to keep the wealth that the whites had there. He needed the expertise and knowledge that they'd built up over time, and so they were able to work that out. So people should not be fearful of African Americans and Latinos taking over governments or what have you, the Mandela example. But my mother, I think, is somebody I'll look up to, because she was always such a great stalwart, and one of those, every family has one of those, and all the wisdom that she provided to me. She was really like a best friend in addition to a mom, and she knew how to talk to me in great straight ways. So her and my dad and my grandparents, those are great people that I looked up to greatly. And I also have to say that I look up to people in the community and things they were able to accomplish. Wilhelmina Delco and the things she's done for education, because education is so important, or different people who provided me good advice, like Reverend Willie Harris up in Dallas. He told me one thing when I became a young NAACP president. He said, "Young man, if you have a dog, you train him to stay in the yard, you don't need a fence." And so his message was really and truly that, you need to understand that you can do it. Don't let people limit you, because we've allowed the emasculation of our minds to take place, where we don't truly understand who we are and the things we've contributed, where kids don't know the talent and the ability, and they bought into what they can be, and that's just not true. That there's nothing in the world that you can't do Whether you start looking at Granville Woods creating the first electrical transfer of information, getting a patent, and he fought Edison for many years because he said Edison had stolen what he had created and gotten patents on. But the filament in the light bulb, the elevator, all those things were things that were done by Granville Woods. So you got to look at it, and we've got great talent. So that was you have a lot of heroes and a lot of people that your teachers. They had tough teachers. Miss Whitaker, Mr. Henson, Miss Washington, people that would straighten you out when you needed to be straightened out. I mean, those kind of people you always remember.
Describe the Black experience here in Austin.
It's unique and different because Austin sadly has discrimination from the left. I look at the gentrification of East Austin because we know about discrimination from the right, and I'm on the left, right? I mean, my natural philosophy is on the left. I'm a Democrat. I'm a proud Democrat. Because the Democratic Party is the one party that does speak to issues of the African American community. So it saddens me when I look at things like the gentrification that takes place and how people will allow monetary gains to invade decency. And so that's it's not quite the vibe that people want to make it out to be. And I look at what happens with police. Thank God for Nelson Linder, because he's been such an incredible leader on police issues. He's one of the best in the whole nation. But you still have so much abuse that takes place. People still haven't gotten to the point where they would treat people well. We got to look at the Breon King situation just a couple of years ago, and you see what happened until the issue made the news, right? So how many other Breon Kings are there? The guy takes the young lady, slams her up against the car like a rag doll, and they give him a reprimand? That's actually insane, but that tells you everything that you need to know, that the system is still broken. And we may have people that are nice and people who maybe vote the same way we do, who may show up at our banquets and things, but when it's time for real decisions to be made, Austin still has a ways to go.
What is your hope for Austin?
My hope for Austin is that people will come to understand that racism is just as important as, for example, environmental issues and things like that, growth issues. Because I understand wanting to keep Austin the way that you want to keep it. I think that battle was lost, though, even though that was put at the front and center. And I was one of the members of the Black community who was with the environmentalists, because I always wanted to see Austin kind of limit its growth. And so I was the one who took the unpopular position of supporting the SOS and things like that. But Austin needs to kind of move beyond. I look at some of the things that happened in the city of Austin, and I see the things, for example, the anonymous reporting things and guidelines, and seeing all the Black employees that are victimized by this anonymous reporting policy that they allow. So you never get to address the individual who files a complaint on you, which I think is absolutely absurd and ridiculous. But you find those kind of things that still happen in this community, and a lot of the Black leadership in the city have been victimized, because once they're out there doing good things, they look up and there's an anonymous complaint filed. So Austin really has a ways to go. You look at some of the things that the housing department didn't do for African Americans, that everybody else has projects and things that are completed on schedule, but they did not. So Austin isn't really quite what you want to say it is, and the fact that you're going forward with this new code next, or with the new name of it, policy, that's going to just gentrify this community like nothing we've ever seen, even more so. And because, see, that's even electoral implications to that, because single-member districts, Cheryl Cole almost lost her seat, okay, even though she was the choice of the Black community. So the likelihood of holding on to that seat for a long time may be really suspect. The likelihood of holding on to an African American council seat that fought for many years may be suspect, because with the gentrification comes this issue of the whole voting dynamic, right? Because you're going to impair the ability to maintain the seats. And so there are all kinds of issues like that that are truly problematic. So I'm hoping, because, I know most of the people on the left, and I think most of them are really good people. But I think somehow we've got to have a better conversation, and they've got to be able to understand our issues more and be able to stand up and be counted. When you have somebody being brutalized by police, one of the things that people get brainwashed for is they tell you, well, once you become a member of the city council, your responsibility is to the city. But no, it's to the city, but that doesn't mean that you do what some city investigator or somebody tells you is in the financial interest of the city. If you have somebody that brutalizes one of your citizens, that you need to take action against the person who brutalized them, and you need to try to indemnify the individual that was brutalized. The interest of the city is not with trying to say no and we're not going to settle this case. The interest in the city to make this the kind of righteous city that it should be would be doing the right thing, because that's going to what that's going to do is stop those kind of things from happening. Because if someone knows I can't brutalize a citizen and get away with it, then fewer people are going to brutalize citizens. And you're doing the right thing if you happen to compensate someone that was brutalized because of all the harms and the anguish. When somebody gets brutalized like Miss King, I can only imagine what she had to feel like. A good school teacher, always following the rules, no kind of record of any kind whatsoever, being nice to the officer. Unbelievable, unimaginable.
Yeah. How do you want people to remember you?
Somebody who tried to make things better, pretty and simply, that was connected to all people, that I care about white people, I care about brown people, I care about red and yellow people, just like I care about black people. My mission is to hopefully bring people together, and my mission is to hopefully make the world we live in a better place, so that you can have people, and the young people are better than people in my generation. We were superior, I think, in many ways to people that come out of previous generations, but we still have those faults. But if we can bring some level of sensitivity and understanding, so people can see us differently, and we can make for a latitude where there's opportunity for people, and you can transcend some of these labels, because we have to look at it this way. This is how I look at it. The survival of mankind depends on whether or not this American experiment lives, because you look all around the world, and in one country it may be Sunni versus Shiite, right? In another country it may be someone who is Muslim versus Buddhist or what have you. So you find issues that may be at a racial divide, and it may not be black-white, it may be other types of racial divides, or there may be religious divides, and there are all kinds of scorn and conflict, and you find people killing each other under the name of religion or the name of their race. But the American example is to do what? Is to bring in people in a pluralistic, multicultural way, and have everybody to have a say. And to the extent that that can work, where you can have people that are Muslim and Jewish standing together, like when I saw the mayor give an award at the Democratic Party breakfast here to imam from one of the local mosques, the Jewish mayor and the imam. That was a beautiful thing to watch, right? So that's the kind of thing that we want to have. That's what Austin should be known for, but it shouldn't be just known for that by gestures. It should be known for that for real. We shouldn't go along with gentrification. We shouldn't go along with taking away voting rights from individuals. We shouldn't go along with people being brutalized, saying, well, we just couldn't do it today. You can't stand there and be on a grand jury. I look at some of the things that happen. For example, I'm trying to think of, some of the examples of the most heinous cases that were not charged by local grand juries, or some that were charged were through a quirk of circumstance, people were acquitted of the charges. I know that. So we those are the kind of things we've got to bring sensitivity to people. And so right now we're nowhere near where we need to be. We're nowhere near where we think we are, because we aren't quite the progressive community that we think we are. But it's a great community. It's a lovely community. It's a community that has a lot of potential. But I think if you start looking at that and looking at things like what is the 1927 ordinance, of the 1953 changes after Arthur B. DeWitt almost got elected to the city council, whether it's the issues that have occurred when Charles Miles and others tried to run for office and couldn't win at the level because of the polarized voting. I know we disagreed with this, but the lawyers for the city and the county and redistricting were able to get the court to say there's no more racially polarized voting in Travis County. And those are really great lawyers who are friends of mine, but I disagree with that, and that may make it more difficult for us to achieve the kind of electoral parity or equity we need for African Americans and Latinos in this community because of that decision. So I think a more sensitive community would never have allowed that type thing to take place, that effort to be taken up by the courts.
What are life lessons that you've learned?
I think life lessons that I've learned are always try to do right, because if you do something wrong, at least with me, that karma comes back and bites you very quickly. And so that's one of the things. Another thing that I've learned is the old thing about, a person's worth the sweat from their brow. If you really work hard, you can do it, and young people need to know it. Some people may have more gifts than others. Some people may be smarter than others, but you can't make up for hard work. And if you really want something, you can be an A student. You can have an average mind and be an A student if you really want it, and you can be great. I've met many people that were great and tremendous, but they worked really hard. It's one of those things I tell young people is you study something not until you finish the assignment. You study something until you learn, understand, and know the assignment. That's the big difference. Read pages 1 through 15. Learn, know, and understand pages 1 through 15. That's what they need to know. And I think another thing that I've learned is that that there's good in all colors. There's good in all shapes, good in all philosophies. You find good Democrats, good Republicans, bad Democrats, bad Republicans, good blacks, bad whites, good whites, bad blacks. So that's one of those things that you can't, so to speak, they say judge a book by its cover, and that's really true. And you'll also find that 95% of people have some good core with them, and there's some way to reach that good core. Some people don't, and that's kind of hard to realize, but so I disagree with those who say every person. I think most every person, but there are some people that I've seen that I have yet to find anything decent in.
This is the last question. What do you enjoy doing in your leisure time, if you have any?
Well, of course, I love my NAACP activities and love the folks in the NAA, and I love spending time with my wife, going to movies, walking my dogs, spending time with the boys, or I guess my hobbies are I probably work out 7 days a week, because I believe that you have to stay fit and you stay younger if you work out. My big hobby is scuba diving. That's what I do. Just did some scuba diving down in Mexico, and so I really enjoy scuba diving. I think that's a lot of fun. So, and I've taken up hiking more lately, and so hiking is really a lot of fun. More people should do hiking, because the beautiful world that I have out there, and I ran into my friend Sam Stobin, and he got me into hiking, and so Alberta and I went with he and his wife and did a hiking expedition trip back in September, and that was great. And what he does, he shows up in a new town, new country, goes out there and walks for 5 or 6 hours. And I started doing the same thing. And so instead of going and taking a taxi, well, I want to go down to Parliament, or I want to go there, you just walk. You see people, you know people, you understand people. I did a little bit like that in South Africa, and it was really wonderful because I felt it was such a great experience in South Africa.
So that was my last question. Do you have anything else you'd like to share?
No, I think that if anything to share, I think that we should say that we all need to understand that it is time to make the American example be what it can be, and show where people can get together, discuss their differences, and make for a good situation. We need to make that the case here and be able to export that everywhere around the world, because if we don't, we've reached a situation now where it can be headed in the other direction. I don't think we survive if you have people at their throats. I think it was all intended that we be brothers and sisters. What did Martin Luther King say? We'll have to learn how to live together as brothers, or we will perish as fools.
Great
Thank
way
you.
to end it.